everybody. My name is Sarah Sims, and I am the Manager of Continuing Education for the Brown School here at Washington University in St. Louis. Thank you all for joining us for today's Open Classroom program. Open Classroom is the Brown School's virtual and free professional development series. Beyond Open Classroom, we are the largest provider of continuing education units in both Missouri and Illinois. So if you are looking for CEUs, or if you're looking to extend your learning in other ways, I invite you to visit our website to find out more about some of our other offerings. You can find us at brownschool.woostel.edu under the Resources and Initiative tabs, and I will drop a link in the chat in just a moment. We offer workshops on a variety of topics year-round on almost a weekly basis. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. This is a Zoom webinar, so we can't see or hear you, but we really do want to engage with you, hear your comments, your questions, and you can do that through the chat, which a lot of you are already doing. So right now, please feel free to say hello and where you're joining us from. And then throughout the presentation, please drop any questions that you have about the topic or for Dr. An in the chat, and we will do Q&A at the end. We are also live streaming on YouTube, so I'll drop a link to the chat in a moment if you want to share the live stream with any friends or colleagues. So, all right, now I'm going to introduce my colleague, Dr. Rupang An. He's an associate professor here at the Brown School, and he is the leader of our artificial intelligence series on Open Classroom. And he also leads a professional certificate course on AI, which we are excited to be able to offer again this fall. Registration details are coming soon, but I will put a link to that for people who want to learn more. It's open to anybody, not just Brown School students. So if you really want a deep dive into artificial intelligence, I really encourage you to check out that program. So more about Dr. An. He conducts research to assess environmental influences and population level interventions on weight-related behaviors and outcomes throughout the life course. In particular, his work assesses socioeconomic determinants and policies that affect individuals' dietary behavior, their physical activity, sedentary lifestyle, and in children, adults of all ages, and people with disabilities. His research aims to develop a well-rounded knowledge base and policy recommendations that can inform decision-making and the allocation of resources to combat obesity. Dr. An's research has been funded by federal agencies and private foundations. He serves as a research grant reviewer for the NIH, the HHS, the NSF, and the French National Research Agency. Dr. An has wide teaching and methodological interests, including applied artificial intelligence, machine and deep learning, which he's going to talk about today, quantitative policy analysis, causal inference, cost benefit and cost effectiveness analysis, and microsimulation. He also researches applied econometrics and regression analysis, systematic review and meta-analysis, and data storytelling. So I welcome Dr. An, and please join me in welcoming him here today. He's going to present part one of a two-part series called Write Effective ChatGPT Prompts to Boost Research Productivity. So Dr. An, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you, Zizi, and great to see everyone here. So I'm really excited to share some of the techniques that we learned over the past several months regarding how to use ChatGPT to boost our research capacities. And the work that I'm going to present today doesn't actually belong to myself. We have a team of talented researchers and students working on a daily basis, learning from online tutorials, learning from OpenAI documentations and various resources, and of course, practicing using ChatGPT on a daily or if not hourly basis. And we learned, we accumulate the knowledge and the expertise over time. So a big shout out to our team members and fantastic students. So now let's get started. Let me share my screen. Okay, so now as we promised today, this is the first part of a two-part presentation regarding how we can leverage the power of ChatGPT to boost our research productivity. It is not an exaggeration to say that myself, by using ChatGPT, I improve or boost my research productivity by about 50%, if not more. So let's dive into this topic. So this is an animation just to show our fantastic ChatGPT being on board. So really, what is ChatGPT? If you haven't heard about ChatGPT, which is unlikely because you are in the space to learn more about it. But anyway, the ChatGPT is a large language model designed by OpenAI that uses artificial intelligence to generate human-like responses to natural language queries. So ChatGPT is not the only model that can communicate with humans. So besides ChatGPT, there are many competitors, and there's a relatively short but fruitful history of natural language processing models over the past 5 to 7 years. So now we all heard of ChatGPT, and if you ask about the popularity of the ChatGPT use, by January 2023, early this year, the ChatGPT crossed over 100 million users, making it the fastest growing consumer application of all time. We don't have the most recent data, but probably the user base doubled or even tripled. So let's take a look of the statistics to see what is the prevalence of ChatGPT use. Again, this is old data collected by the end of January. As we can see from this survey, about 12% of the US adults mentioned that I've used the ChatGPT myself to generate text. Another 38% mentioned I've seen text generated for someone else, but haven't used it myself. And another 40% mentioned I've never used or never seen anyone like use that. But again, this is old data. And by now, probably a lot more people are being attracted and use ChatGPT as I'm doing on a daily basis. So what is fundamentally different from ChatGPT and the other natural language models that are around for quite some time? So the uniqueness of the ChatGPT actually is presented in this graph. So the graph, as you can see, can be divided into two parts. On your left-hand side, we see the more traditional type of natural language processing training process, which is just to allow the model to predict the next word. So the natural language model are fed by gigabytes and gigabytes of text, natural text, no matter harvested online from internet or book chapters or transcript of videos or audios. So those huge amount of text are fed into those natural language processing models. And those so-called causal model is just trying to predict the next word with the highest probability. Okay? So that is we call this unsupervised or self-supervised part of the NLP model, which belong to the more traditional side of NLP training. But the fantastic communication strategy that ChatGPT learned over the days is the second part. So basically, after the pre-training of the GPT model, the supervised learning using reinforcement learning techniques is used, in which human annotators interact with the NLP model and try to teach the model what is a good response and what is not so good response. So based on the human response, the GPT model learned human preferences and then began to get even better in communicating with humans and responding to the human with some helpful text generation. So that is the human in the loop, and reinforcement learning is a key part of ChatGPT, which differ from the previous NLP models. And talking about the NLP models, the models are getting bigger and bigger over time. So if we trace back to several years ago, when Google developed their very first NLP models called Albert and other models that use the Sesame Street characters to name those models. And as we can see that the number of parameters, so the parameters, you could think of parameters are basically numerical values, that are stored in the model to provide capacity for model to do predictions. Right? So the size of the model measured by the parameters, the number of parameters increases dramatically over time. As we see here, the GPT-3 model has an astonishing 175 billion parameters. And although the OpenAI doesn't release the number of parameters in the ChatGPT model, and the backbone model, the most recent model is actually GPT-4, but some people suspect that the number of parameters could achieve 1 trillion. So think about the models with such a high number of parameters and try to grab the world of knowledge to store in the parameters in a very compressed way. So the model performance increases dramatically when we use this scale up approach. So the model with higher parameters tend to perform better and more versatile compared to a model with fewer parameters. So take a look at this graph, which is the OpenAI assessment of its GPT 3.5 model, which was the model that ChatGPT was based upon, in comparison to the newly released GPT-4 model, which is the state-of-the-art model nowadays. And now you can use ChatGPT based on either GPT 3.5 or the state-of-the-art GPT-4 model. And not to mention that GPT-5 model is on the horizon. The OpenAI recently announced that it's going to release the GPT-5 model probably by the end of this calendar year. So this graph shows the exam results achieved by GPT 3.5 model versus GPT-4 model. There are two versions of GPT-4 model with and without computer vision capacity. Now, as you can see, those are the test results completed and achieved by GPT models regarding those AP and GRE tests. And we can see that GPT-4 model achieved much higher capacity in comparison to GPT 3.5 model. Okay? And usually the accuracy rate is above 80%, sometimes almost achieving 100%. And besides that, the OpenAI also tested the GPT models on the so-called MMLU benchmark. So basically, that benchmark is a suite of 14,000 multiple choice questions spanning over 57 subjects or domains. Okay? And they tested this benchmark on GPT models using different languages. Besides English, they use many other less common languages as well. As we can see that if the machine is just randomly guessing, the accuracy is only 25% because there are 4 choices in a model. But for GPT-4 model, if we take a look at the GPT-4 model in English, the accuracy is 85.5%. Right? And For other languages, the performance of the GPT-4 model is lower, but still quite amazing. And we all take for granted that humor is a human talent, right? So we provided, the OpenAI provided this this graph to the GPT model with computer vision capacity, and ask the model, what is funny about this image? Describe it panel by panel. So this image for us, when we have some background information, we understand where the humor comes from, but it is pretty challenging for machine to figure it out. But let's take a look of how the GPT-4 model respond. So the GPT-4 model respond, the humor in this image comes from the absurdity of plugging a large outdated VGA connector into a small modern smartphone charging port, right? So this is exactly where the humor comes from. It's summarized by the model automatically in a very concise and precise way. So when we talk about 20 years ago, if we still remember vividly about the digital divide. So basically, people who know how to serve and use the internet with people who do not know how to use internet. There's a huge productivity gap. There's a huge discrepancy between those two types of people. But nowadays, we would argue that we are officially entering the great AI divide. So on the one hand, people who know how to leverage an NLP model, such as ChatGPT, they will have the world of knowledge and know-how at their fingertips. This is not an exaggeration. Later on, when we do some demonstration, hopefully it's going to convince you that is the reality. So my little hypothesis around this AI divide is that no matter actually whether you are a proficient AI engineer or data scientist, or you are just a layperson, know a little bit about AI, for everyone, I would say, thanks to the ChatGPT and other NLP models and other other AI models, the baseline of our productive is higher. So basically, everyone could benefit to some extent by exposing to the AI models. However, we shouldn't be naive about the gap. So I would argue that the gap between those who know how to leverage the power of AI and those who do not are probably 10 times wider simultaneously. So on the one hand, the baseline is higher for everyone, but the differential in productivity between those who know and without leveraging the power of AI is going to increase dramatically. Okay? So that is a dynamic gap that we are about to see in the very near future. So the question is, are you afraid of AI, or should you be afraid of AI? Right? So that is the question I ask myself every single day, because now every single day, or probably every single hour, there's going to be some new inventions around AI. Just in the morning, I checked GitHub regarding the recent applications based on top of the ChatGPT, and there were 12,000 of them already. Okay. So that is how the technology is advancing, and not to say the other competitors, for example, Google and Apple and Meta, they are catching up. Right. So there's probably some of you have heard of the 1,000 scientists and entrepreneurs signed an open letter to suspend the development of AI technology or GPT models for 6 months. But my assumption that is not going to happen. It's not because of the one particular company in concern, but really because of this free market competition, right? So even if OpenAI decide not to postpone its development of natural language processing models, how about the other 100, 1,000 firms, right? Would other people see it as an opportunity actually to do the catch up, right? So just because of this very nature of free market competition, it is unlikely that we can go back. There's probably no way for us to go back. And possibly we have already reached the so-called technical singularity in which the technology is going to advance more rapidly forever, and the speed of invention is going to be accelerated even more or increase exponentially. There's just no way for us to go back to our good old days. So I don't know your feeling, but I'm kind of afraid of AI. I'm afraid of AI not because I believe that AI is going to replace human beings, or we have this doomsday type of hypothesis like depicted in the Terminator series. The reason why I'm afraid of AI is because I'm afraid of being replaced not by machine, but by people who are better at me in leveraging the power of AI. Okay? So that is a major concern. Some of you have already probably observing a trend of traditional jobs, not really traditional jobs that we think of, but some jobs that are being disproportionately affected by ChatGPT type of models. For example, creative arts, right? For example, freelance writing news articles, right? For example, in the financial industry, doing accounting or writing columns about the stock market, right? So there are probably going to be other industries affected as well. But really, probably in the next 5 years, we are going to see a dramatic change or dramatic impact in the reshuffling of the industries and labors in the job market. So bear that in mind. I think that gives you another incentive to learn about AI now, because if we do not learn, others would learn, and our job could be in jeopardy. So that is the reason why I myself is afraid of AI, because now the open-ended question is we do not know what AI cannot do. So talking about prompt engineering, which is the way, at least the current way that we communicate with AI, right? And before we even start about talking about prompt engineering, think about how a human being use language, right? So probably 90% or more of the conversations are done using language of some sort or some type, right? So no matter you are writing poems or you are talking with your colleague about a mathematical question, or whether you are writing essays and grant writing, and all those actually heavily involve the language use. Okay, so basically, language is the way our human beings communicate with each other and articulate our ideas. Okay? So, well, in science fiction, aliens may not use language. Aliens may use, may communicate with each other using brain waves or some sort, which may be a more efficient way, because we know language is imprecise. Language is actually absurdly imprecise and have various type of errors and biases. But still, using this imperfect language, we human beings have achieved much of the civilization to today. And so language probably is the most natural way to communicate between humans, and maybe also the long-dreamed goal of communicating with machines. So I argue that the prompt engineering, basically how to write good prompt to machines, is the open sesame to the treasure of ChatGPT and all the other generative AI models. Okay, so if you remember that the the fable about Alibaba in terms of open sesame, right? Open sesame was the keyword to open the treasure to the mountains of Treasureland, right? So prompt engineering probably is the open sesame to the treasure of ChatGPT. So what is prompt engineering? We define prompt engineering as the process of carefully choosing and crafting specific words, phrases, or code snippets to train AI systems in producing desirable responses or outputs. Basically, it's the way that you demand and you ask the ChatGPT and other models, natural language models, to do what you want it to do. So here we take a look of the ChatGPT interface if you haven't played with ChatGPT at all. So the free version of ChatGPT actually allows you to use GPT 3.5, which is the default and the original GPT model. But if you have subscribed to ChatGPT Plus, which is a bit of an investment of $20 per month, you would be able to access GPT-4, which is a more advanced, the state-of-the-art GPT model that has a lot higher capacity. So my personal experience of using GPT-4 is that it is not an incremental to GPT 3.5. It's a huge gain and huge advancement in comparison to GPT 3.5. If you have already used the free version, then you've got to use this amazing result from GPT 3.5. But well, no, if you use GPT-4, you don't want to go back. So now let's talk about the key to excellence in prompt engineering. There are tons of tutorials, probably thousands would be not exaggeration, or probably tens of thousands of videos in YouTube, the blog posting, to the online tutorials, the amazing number of books. If you search the Amazon, just use ChatGPT, well, you are going to find probably 100 plus ChatGPT books already. So really, you are going to be quickly consumed by the sheer number of tutorials and so-called guidelines and the best practices. And you could lose sight very quickly, right? And our team spent a number of months in trying to go through a large number of those prompts, of those tutorials. And what we found actually is pretty simple. So first, I would say do not be blinded or do not be consumed by those sheer number of tutorials. We can boil it down to a single phrase. And that single phrase and golden recipe I'm going to tell you is written below in 3 words: critical thinking skills. Okay. So you will say, well, this is a cliche. No, we know how important critical thinking is, but what is the deal here? So the deal here, as I'm going to illustrate later in this and also next talk, is basically tell you how you think critically in communicating with ChatGPT to make your idea clear, to make your demand clear and transparent to the GPT model, and also how you can inspire each other. So basically, you inspire the GPT model to think about something, and then based on the response of the model, you think deeper about that thing. And it's going to be during this iterative process that you are going to gain the most from the road of knowledge stored compressively in the GPT model. Okay. So we should not lose sight by just blindly learning those so-called best practices or prompt templates. Okay. So the templates are good, the practices are useful, but they should complement but not replace your critical thinking skills. No, so that is the fundamental, I would say, fundamental key to excellence in prompt engineering that we try to bear in mind. And now let's talk about the 10 essential principles of prompt engineering. As you see here, unlike other tutorials that give you a lot of templates, a lot of keywords or phrases, I use none of them because I don't believe there's a single way that is best to communicate with ChatGPT. There's just no single way. It's no single best way. But there are some principles that we can use to generalize the very different ways, the creative ways that we can communicate with ChatGPT. So I believe the principles have a lot more generalizability compared to whatever templates, 1,000 or 10,000 templates you are going to study and you're going to apply. So the first principle is be specific and clear in your prompt. Okay, you think, well, this is cliche. Of course, I want to be specific and want to clear, but I'll give you specific examples. I'll give you examples on each of the 10 essential principles, and to not to suggest to use the same example, but to give you some idea about how you can creatively apply those principles. And the second is to break down complex questions into simpler parts because, well, think about machine is not at a human intelligence level, at least not for now. So for a complicated question, our human beings are excellent in dividing the complex task into many smaller tasks that are interrelated. The answer to one task leads to the response to the second task, and so on and so forth. Right? So very similarly, when you communicate with a machine, you want to break a complex question into smaller and more manageable parts. And by interacting and iterating with the machine and you are going to both learn better and deeper. The third principle is to experiment with different prompt formulations. As I said, there's no golden standard of any kind. So no one actually have figured out how to interact with the machine, because think about the world of knowledge has been stored very compressively in those possibly a trillion parameters, right? Each parameter is just a numerical value, right? A floating number, right? So what is the best way to unzip, to decompress the knowledge into human language that we understand? No one have the clue. Right? So therefore, the way is to experiment with different prompt formulations. If one prompt doesn't work, experiment with a similar but slightly different one. The fourth principle is to set context and provide instructions. Right? Because if you only ask machine to give you an idea about research project, the machine doesn't know anything about your research. The machine doesn't know anything about the setting. It is for the industry, it is for academia, it is for public health problem, or it is for a mathematical setup. Right? So therefore, you need to set the context as if you were communicating with a human being. The fifth principle is to ask for step-by-step explanations and pros and cons. Right? This is important because you want to weigh the pros and cons of the machine-generated text in order to make decisions about next step. The sixth principle is to request for sources and citations, because we all heard of the news that the ChatGPT model tend to hallucinate, right? Creating something that doesn't exist, giving you citations that doesn't exist, right? But, well, amazingly, GPT-4 model have some kind of ways to fact checking, and we will talk about that later on. Right? So a simple way is just to ask machine to double check and triple check the answers and try to self-correct those mistakes and hallucinations. Principle number 7 is to ask for alternative viewpoints, basically arguments and counter arguments. So think about you are doing a debate, right? You want to argue in both ways. Now, if you don't argue, then the reviewer is going to argue with you, right? So that is part of the science because we try to make arguments to make our scientific project more robust, right? Try to catch the mistakes and errors in early stages. Okay? And machine is actually very profound in providing alternative viewpoints. Number 8 is to use constraints to control response length or format because ChatGPT wants to chat, right? You are going to very soon realize ChatGPT is a great conversational bot, but sometimes probably talk too much. In this case, you want to somehow control the response to make sure that the response is right to the point and exactly what you need, no less, no more. Number 9 is to provide examples. Okay? So now think about if you talk to a graduate student or if you are say primary school teacher and giving instructions to to probably a 5-year-old or 10 years old. So what you do is you not only provide the instruction, but also you give some examples, right? And then the students are more likely to follow examples because we human beings are very good at analogy, right? We make analogies all the time, right? So actually machine is fantastic in making analogy and following examples because, well, mathematically, the machine uses numerical vectors to contain each word, and each word is related to the other words based on the so-called mathematical embedding. And the embedding itself actually is a similarity matter. Okay? So that is the reason why machine is fantastic learning from examples. Now, if the instruction is too technical, the machine may not be able to understand fully. But if you just give a few examples, the machine actually can follow very much your desired output. And number 10 is to encourage critical thinking and exploration. So basically, this tells the machine, allow the machine to freely explore. Because think about, well, although machine is not a free soul, but a machine may not have free will, but machine has this vast of knowledge, right? So if you restrict your demand so tightly that you do not allow machine to exercise its critical thinking skill, exercise is accessibility to its knowledge pool, then it's going to be a waste of the resource. Right? And it's going to limit what the machine actually can provide. So you do want to provide some kind of freedom for the machine to explore. And we'll illustrate that in our prompt engineering exercises. Okay, so now let's provide some examples regarding each principle. So principle 1, as we said, is be specific and clear in your prompt. So instead of asking, for example, what are the benefits of exercise? So here realize that we use red color to denote a not so good prompt, whereas we use a green color to denote a better. It's of course not optimal, but it's a better prompt. Right? So the goal here is not to memorize the prompt because it's a futile exercise. There are going to be millions of prompts or trillions of prompts over the years. It's really to exercise your generalizability of using those 10 principles. Okay? So here, give an example of be specific and clear in your prompt. So instead of asking what are the benefits of exercise, better to ask what are the cardiovascular benefits of moderate intensity aerobic exercise for adults, right? Because this is a lot more specific. Right? Instead of asking how do vaccines work, is much better to ask the question, please explain the mechanism of action of mRNA vaccines in generating immunity against viral infections. Okay, be very specific and clear in your prompt. Number 1. Okay. So number 2, break down complex questions into smaller parts. So instead of asking what is the impact of nutrition on cognitive function, which is definitely a complicated ask. So you may first ask, how do specific nutrients such as omega-3 fatty acids influence cognitive function? And after, based on the response, you may further ask, what are the mechanisms or pathways through which nutrition affects brain health? Okay, so put them into two parts instead of asking an overall complex question. The second example, rather than asking how does air pollution affect human health, probably it's a better idea to first ask the question, what are the common air pollutants and their sources? And then ask how do these pollutants contribute to respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. So principle 3 is to experiment with different prompt formulations. One example is, if you don't get the desired answer when asking the prompt, what is the role of microbiota in human health? You can rephrase it in another way. For example, how do gut microbiota influence human health and disease, right? And the second prompt is better because it gives you basically a directionality of what impact what. A second example, if you can't get a satisfactory results from asking the prompt, how do genetic factors influence obesity? You can try a different formulation. For example, what are the specific genes and pathways involved in the development of obesity? So principle 4 is set the context and provide instructions. For example, if you ask how is diabetes treated, well, there's no context, right, in this question. Maybe you can specify by providing some context, explain the treatment options for type 2 diabetes, considering lifestyle changes, medications, and surgical interventions. Another example is instead of asking, what are the risk factors for Alzheimer's disease? You may provide some context. For example, describe the modifiable and non-modifiable risk factors for the development of Alzheimer's disease. Principle 5 is to ask step-by-step explanations or pros and cons, which is very important and very commonly applied in prompt engineering. So instead of asking which study design should I use, it's much better to ask the question, what are the pros and cons of using a cross-sectional study design versus a longitudinal study design in examining the effects of diet on obesity? And you can also add a question, please explain this step by step, so that the machine is going to explain not only the pro and con, but also how it derives such evidence. So instead of asking, how do I conduct a systematic review, which is too broad and not specific, you can ask the ChatGPT to provide you the key steps involved in conducting a systematic review and meta-analysis of clinical trials. So it's going to give you probably a list or bullet point like step-by-step instruction about all the key procedures in conducting a systematic review. So principle 6 is request for sources and citations to address hallucination and lack of fact-checking. One example could be, what are the latest advancements in immunotherapy for cancer treatment, right? And instead of just asking the question, you can add another sentence. Please provide the sources or citations for my information. And actually, ChatGPT is going to provide you all the citations it uses. And then, of course, if you are suspicious whether any of those citations are make up, you can always Google it or use other search engines. Another example would be what clinical evidence supports the use of probiotics for managing irritable bowel syndrome. And instead of just asking a question, you just add another specification. Please provide relevant source of citations. So principle 7 is to ask for alternative viewpoints. Remember the arguments and counter arguments that you exercise in your elementary or middle school debate teams, right? So one example could be requesting different perspectives. What are the arguments for and against using statins for primary prevention of cardiovascular disease? Okay, so it's going to tell you the argument for both for and against, the pros and the cons, right? So it gives you a more holistic understanding of the question at hand. Another example could be encouraged exploration of opposing viewpoints, maybe using a prompt provide arguments against implementing a sugar tax to combat obesity. Because remember, we are all very much passionate about, say, what we believe to be socially beneficial, right? For example, sugar tax, right? Sugar sweetened beverage tax. But we need to carefully consider not to be biased by our own viewpoint. It is important actually to give you some opposing thoughts about your argument, and that is usually beneficial to provide you a more holistic understanding. Okay. So principle 8 is to use constraints to control the response length and format. For example, to receive a concise answer, you can ask, after your request, you can ask, please summarize the main findings of the Framingham Heart study in 3 sentences. Okay? So here is not to be shy. If you want to summarize in 3 sentences, 100 words, just tell. Right? And the ChatGPT is very versatile in providing either expanding or compressing the content to the desirable length or format. And if you want to get a structured response, you can ask, list 5 health benefits of regular yoga practice and provide a brief explanation for each. It's going to give you a bullet-like response. And for each health benefit, it's going to give you a brief reason. Principle 9 is to provide examples. And in fact, it has a specific name in machine learning. It's called few-shot learning. To guide the model performance. So here, for example, you can list risk factors for developing specific disease following the same format as the example below. Okay, so this is the prompt. And after prompt, what you want to say, first you provide the first example. Okay, notice that the first example is formatted. Okay, you have first disease and then type 2 diabetes. So this is a type of disease. And then you list the risk factors, obesity, sedentary lifestyle, family history, age, high blood pressure. Okay, so this is a complete example. Okay, and then you give another example because, few-shot learning basically means that you provide several examples as part of your prompt. So the second part of the prompt is another example. Disease is heart disease. Risk factors include high blood pressure, high cholesterol, smoking, obesity, and diabetes. And then look at this. The third one is not example. The third one actually is what you want to ask. You provide the name of the disease, which is Alzheimer's disease, and then you have risk factors column, okay? But you have nothing there. But remember, the ChatGPT model is based on GPT-4 model, which is a causal language model. And the causal language model is trained to predict the next word. So therefore, actually, no matter what ChatGPT is doing, underlying it is just trying to predict the next word. It is trying to complete the sentences or paragraphs. Okay? So therefore, by providing this few-shot example, you actually guide the ChatGPT to answer the risk factors associated with the Alzheimer's disease. And principle 10, the last principle, is to encourage critical thinking and exploration. So instead of simply asking what are the effects of smoking on lung health, you can prompt for a deeper analysis with discuss the short-term and long-term effects of smoking on lung health and the potential mechanism involved. So basically, it's going to allow the machine to explore using its own knowledge to come up with some analysis. Instead of asking what is the relationship between stress and heart disease, you can encourage the machine to self-explore by asking, analyze potential pathways through which stress may contribute to the development of heart disease, considering both direct and indirect effects. So we've introduced you the 10 principles, but really it is the creative combinations of these 10 principles that are the queen. It is not single principle that work in isolation. It is take the combination and creative combination of those principles. Right? So that's probably stop here, and we have about 10 minutes for questions. And we have a lot more to introduce, and we'll resume that in the next session that we will talk about the 10 stages of research and how the ChatGPT, we can leverage the power of ChatGPT to address each of those 10 stages in your research. Okay. So that stop here, and that's open to questions.
Yeah, and we've got several, so I'm going to try to get through as many as possible. The first one I have is around the language that you use when you're putting in the prompts. In some of your examples, you used like really specific terms. And is it better to use specific jargon, you know, with respect to the research you're doing, or is it better to use plain language? Yeah, where are you going to get the best results?
This is a great question. Definitely, you can explore the ChatGPT yourself to see what is better suited. But my experience is that you want to be as specific as possible. Don't be afraid that machine don't understand the terminology. Actually, the machine understand probably a million times or maybe a trillion times more than any human being in this world. So the machine know all the terminologies. I'm pretty sure about it. And last, well, this terminology that's just developed, a few days ago, before the machine was, after the machine was trained, right? So that was only constraint, but otherwise, be specific, be as logical and terminology heavy as you want. The machine can understand.
Great, thank you. So the machine is smarter than us, I see. So the next question, I have this one as well, is about citations with ChatGPT. Are there best practices or standards? Do you need to disclose that you use ChatGPT? Should you disclose what your prompts were, or can you simply just cite what the machine gave you in the results?
This is a great question. So no one have a definite answer, right? And it's a huge debate in academia nowadays regarding to what extent we are allowed to use ChatGPT to do research, right? So my personal intake is the following, but of course not everyone agree with me. So I would say, think about it's the very same as if you were using, for example, the computer programs to do statistical programming, right? You need to declare that using this software and that software to assist your calculation, right? Although no one actually report the calculator they used to get this number, right? So I would say, as long as you are honest, you acknowledge that you use the technology to maybe write part of the manuscript, and you acknowledge all the original contributions of the idea. Basically, you provide the citation for each of the sentences and knowledge points that you do not self-create or generate, and making sure that those citations are existent, of course. Then I would say probably we are in good shape. Right. So the worst case would be you are doing plagiarism, right? It's someone else's work, but you claim you're yours. You are using ChatGPT to rephrase someone's work, but without acknowledging it is that person's work. That would be very worrisome, right? And it's not an ethical way of using ChatGPT. So we should be transparent. We should make sure that we acknowledge the original author regarding their ideas. So we are not really breaching the plagiarism, and we are not breaching the ethical concerns.
Yeah. So, and I have a couple of other questions related to like ethics of using ChatGPT. So, it might have overlapped with what you just said, but maybe if you have anything else to add. So I'm going to combine some of these. Are there any other ethical issues that you see or that you know of in using ChatGPT to write literature reviews? And then also any other concerns that you know of around plagiarism in using ChatGPT? And sorry, making a third part to this. How can you still make sure that you as the author, you as the researcher, that your writing style comes through, and that it's does that make sense, that question?
Yeah, sure. First, if you want the ChatGPT to write in anyone's style, you can just tell, right? If you like Shakespeare, you can do Shakespeare. If you like someone else, Elon Musk's way of talking or tweeting, you can definitely do that. But really in doing research, say for example, you really prefer your own writing style, and you can provide example, using few shot learning that we introduced, to tell explicit ChatGPT to follow your writing style in creating a paragraph, summarizing this literature, or talking about some mechanisms in health sciences, right? So that is okay, I would say. So what is not okay is when you use the machine to summarize the literature, but first without acknowledging that we use ChatGPT, and second, you do not acknowledge the original contributor's name and providing the citations. That would be what I'm really concerned about. But other than that, I would say probably you should be fine. Although, different people have different ideas. Some people are really against using ChatGPT at all. Even University of Hong Kong actually banned of using ChatGPT for on campus. So personally, I have some reservations about those banning. I don't think that's going to be very productive and may not be sustainable in the long run. It's like, you can't really prevent students using calculator, right? And it's not really necessary for us to ban the use of calculator. But people have different opinions, and I respect that.
Yeah. And so you've already touched on this a little bit, but this is kind of just a more broad question. Like, can ChatGPT really do a systematic review of literature? Like, can it cover everything on a topic that you want it to?
Right. So that is a great question. I know. Hopefully, this question comes from my class, because I'm teaching systematic review and meta-analysis for 9 years. And I'm not actually afraid that if ChatGPT can do the literary review automatically, I'm not afraid of losing my job as an instructor. To be actually honest, I'm giving a full thought on this, and actually I'm in development of some technologies around using ChatGPT or other models to semi-automate some of the systematic review tasks. I would say in the general, we should always allow people to stay in the loop. So basically, there are some decision nodes and decision points that we don't feel comfortable of delegating machines to do that automatically. But there are other parts of the systematic review which is labor intensive, which is repetitive in nature, and that should be automated. So basically, the goal is to automate what we want to automate, but reserve the human decision-making in the loop.
Sure, we all have parts of our day-to-day research and jobs that we would love for it to be automated, right?
Of course,
so
as much as we can.
Yeah, so I have just 1 minute left, and I actually want to reserve that last minute to plug Dr. An's part 2 of this talk. So part 2 of writing effective ChatGPT prompts to boost research productivity is going to happen same time, so 12:30 p.m. Central Time on May 4th. I dropped a link in the chat to that, so if you aren't registered for part 2, you can do so. If you want to come back to this presentation and review it. A recording will be posted online. And Dr. An, we had a question if you would be willing to share the slides as well online.
Oh, yeah. I'm
Okay.
completely fine with it. Yeah.
Okay, so those slides will also be posted on our professional development webpage. And then finally, please check out the very last link that I posted, which allows you to learn a little bit more about Dr. An's postmaster's certificate course in artificial intelligence. It's open to anybody, whether you're a Brown School student, a WashU student, not a student at all. Anyone is available or is able to take that if you really want to learn a lot more about this topic. But thank you so much, Dr. An, for the presentation today. We look forward to part 2 in May, and thank you everybody for joining and your questions today.